Welcome to Backstage with Richard Ridge. SAG-AFTRA Foundation and BroadwayWorld continue their filmed Conversation Q&A series here at the Robin Williams Center. My guest is a world-renowned actor, director, screenwriter, and producer. He is known to millions of fans as Ray Donovan on the hit Showtime series, and now he is back on Broadway, captivating audiences 8 times a week opposite Janet McTeer in Christopher Hampton's masterpiece, Les Liaisons Dangereuses. Please welcome Tony Award winner Liev Schreiber.
I was really expecting something in like some little lonely lunchroom with like 4 or 5 people. This is very impressive. Thank you all for coming.
Well, listen, first off, welcome back to the theater and to Broadway. How does it feel this time around?
It's the 5 years since I've done a play, and the difference is extraordinary. My ability to remember lines is completely gone out the window. I remember older actors saying to me, I can't, because I can't remember the lines anymore. And I was like, you know, that's never going to happen to me. But sure enough, it does. It's been a really, really wonderful experience, mostly because it's been so difficult. It's a part that I don't think I'm a natural for, but to be honest, I've felt that about nearly every part I've ever been offered. I don't understand why you want me to do that. So it didn't stop me, but this one was really a challenge for me. But the opportunity to work with Janet McTeer was something that I really wasn't going to let go of. We had a very brief rehearsal period. We were basically mounting a production that had already been done before in London, which is something that normally I'm not really that interested in doing. Again, the chance to work with Janet kind of made me overlook that. And we had 4 weeks, and it's a 2 hours and 45 minutes. And I talk all the time. I'm constantly talking. Last night I was on stage, and I had one of those moments, I don't know, you probably had them as actors, where you're acting and you're going, wow, I'm still talking. There's some parts that do that to you. Iago's one of them. You're like, whoa, I'm still going. This is really... And I'm one of those nut jobs who reads everything and knows everything and doesn't care. I believe that you've got to take the good with the bad. This was rough in a couple situations, but we just never gave up. And I was telling Richie in the elevator before, it was about a week ago, that I felt like we got it. And I was doing the play. We were in the kind of the middle of the first act, and I went, oh shit, this is it. We're there. This makes sense. This is interesting. This is compelling, and I see how I can play this role now. Unfortunately, that's about a month after opening, but I guess the point is that you never stop working. You never stop working, especially when you're doing 8 shows a week. You'll go nuts, you know. You never stop working, and you just, to have somebody like Janet who's gutsy that way and wants to keep trying things and wants to keep doing things differently, that's a real blessing. To also, you know, someone who brings that level of game in the first place is a remarkable opportunity. But that thing, you know, it would have been horrible to stop where we stopped, where, you know, the director went back to London 4 weeks in, and then we had to do it for the papers and the premiere, and we weren't ready. But it doesn't matter, and to find out that that really doesn't matter, and to deal with one's ego and humility and all of that stuff, and realize that while it's such an intrinsic part of what we do, is not really the important part of what we do. That's a hard lesson and a valuable one.
Yeah, but you actually do it for the audience. Most stars that I've spoken to say, you know, you have to go through that whole early process of the critics and everybody else coming in. But in the end, you really do it for the audience, and every audience is different, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The problem is it's also a business, you know, so sometimes they invite the audience in before you're ready. you know, because they want to make money, and you know, they can sell seats off of you, particularly, you know. I mean, I wasn't selling a lot of seats back in the 90s at the Public, but after Ray Donovan and a couple movies, you can sell seats to theater shows, expensive seats. And you think about those seats, and they go, should we give you another week to rehearse? How much is $140 a ticket? 600 seats, 8 shows a week? That's a lot of money. I'm going to give you another week to rehearse. So you go in before you're ready, which is a mistake. But it's also just another part of being an actor, and an interesting part. You can look at it one of two ways. You can go, that's terrible, I hate it, I'm miserable. Or you can go, what do I do in this situation? What have I got to give them tonight? You know, even if I'm still looking for it myself, how do I commit to something that's of value to our experience together as an audience? But you're absolutely right, it's always for the audience.
So what was it a few weeks ago? Was there something specific that really unlocked Valmont?
It wasn't a few weeks ago, it was 3 days ago. You know, as usual, I've never been comfortable with my body. I'm someone who's just not. I love moving. I love dancing. I love fighting. I love using my body. But I've never been comfortable with how my body, with impressions of my body. Like, I don't understand that people see me as big, burly, mean guy. I kind of perceive myself as like a, you know, like an elf or something. You know? So I'm kind of at odds with my own physical image. And then sure enough, Ray Donovan came along. I was like, oh, wow, they really do see me as this bruiser. You know. And the other thing that happens is when you do television, this was one of my anxieties about doing television when I first started, when I first was thinking about taking the Ray Donovan job, and I was right, was once you're in everybody's living room as a character, your ability to leave that character behind is diminished significantly. Now, there's a lot of money there. There's a lot of fame and celebrity there. There's a lot of all the stuff that people generally want from acting there. But for my money, our value to audiences is our anonymity, is the fact that we are the characters we suggest we are. And once we start being the personalities or the characters or the celebrities that they're marketing us as, I think that really diminishes us as actors. And I know that the first 20 minutes of Les Liaisons Dangereuses is generally spent by a good 40% of the audience going, why is Ray in pantaloons? Oh my God, he's talking funny. And that wig doesn't suit him at all. And that's really, I hope he takes his shirt off soon. And that is how, I can feel it the first 40 minutes. I come out and I say my first line and they're all like, and you can go, oh shit, that's terrible. Or you can go, how do I work through this?
Yeah.
And I think for me, I was probably carrying, I think even the director, to a degree, was, playing with Ray's sexuality. And I didn't catch it soon enough. And I was like, hey, no, that's not who's here. That's not who's in the room right now. There's a whole me that pre-exists this thing that needs to get away from this thing for the sake of the audience. And maybe I also am guilty, too, of not figuring out how to do that for this time. I went through a lot this year, so it was a hard time to...
Sure.
It was a hard rehearsal process. But those are always the best ones.
You love the rehearsal process the best, don't you?
Me too. I thought you just said I love it.
Well, I do, too, when I talk to people.
I'm hearing things. This is what happens. You know?
What?
You do 8 shows a week. You can't think straight. It's my favorite part. That's why I like doing plays. I want to rehearse them for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
I want to perform them for 1 week. And then that's it. I just like working on plays. I like figuring plays out. And this one, I was in such a panic about all of the lines, so many lines, that was the process. The process was consumed by that. And us kind of trying to get comfortable in this English production that had been done before us. And there just wasn't enough time to move away from that. And I told everybody, look, I don't want to do the same production, but it comes down to it. You got 4 weeks to do a show that big. You just got to do what you can do. 4 weeks, you got to learn the lines and get up and do it. It's just, sorry? What's that? A line from that? Yeah, $130, pal.
Because I thought you were brilliant in this, and I saw it very early on. I saw it 3 days before you opened, and I've seen many productions of this, and I thought you were absolutely brilliant as Velmont.
Well, no,
your version.
That was a very roundabout way of saying that what it was about 3 or 4 days ago, that the epiphany was allowing my version to come through.
Yeah.
Was allowing what I really felt about the instinct about the character to not just be beneath the surface, but actually be extended out into the audience. And I think that was my problem. I think that I was intention and everything was here, and it needed to be out here. And that's happened in the past 3 or 4 days.
Oh, I can't wait to come back. I'm coming back.
I'm not saying it's happening every night.
I'm sure it is.
It happened once, and that's good enough.
Okay. We started to talk about you are known to millions of fans as Ray Donovan. Mm-hmm. Ray Donovan fans? Exactly. On to your 5th season, too. How did the show come about for you? And what made you say yes?
The woman who wrote it, Ann Bitterman, I just thought was really brilliant. It's so odd that this sort of, ultra-masculine character actually springs from the mind of a woman, but of course that makes perfect sense to me. I think she was playing out her own fantasies and dreams and wishes of relationships with her father and brother, and they were so vivid to me. Ray's pain, Ray's anger, Ray's loyalty, Ray's violence, Ray's dedication to the idea of what it is to be where I come from, we call it a mensch. Ray's profound love of family and dedication to them was something that really moved me. I just had some kids, and to be honest, Naomi and I were doing a lot of movies at the time, and we were traveling all around the world, and these poor kids were just flying around with us. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to take a gig that gives us some consistency. Yeah. Naomi at that time had a home in L.A., and I thought, this shoots in L.A. This will make me be in one place for 6 months. I'll be a grown-up. I'll go to work every day and do the same thing. But it turned out to be an incredible experience for me. And as a guy who primarily thinks of himself as a theater actor, a real kind of workshop on doing film, where every day you would go and you would practice and you would do it over and over again. That idea for me is so important to artists, the idea of repetition, the French word for rehearsal, is that you just do it. You do it, and you do it, and you do it, and you develop a facility with it. And that's really what I appreciate about Ray.
Yeah, because the role of Ray is the perfect melding of artist and material. Did you see that early on when you first got it? Was it be a perfect match for you?
No. No, I get nervous when people say that me and Ray are alike. Of course he is, and of course we are to a degree, because every character stems from some place in our own consciousness, but no, I haven't been through the pain that he's been through. I haven't been abused by a priest yet. My father's a pretty decent guy. I do have, I think like all men have, now in this new culture, there is a real question about sexuality and identity and what masculinity means now, what it means to be a man, what it means to be a father. Those are things that are shifting tremendously in our culture. And I think a lot of guys like myself get confused sometimes. And it's important to keep that straight.
You know, just mentor artistry, you know, when an actor gets that role, you know, that it just, everything you do as Ray is just, you are Ray Donovan. I mean, I don't think we could see anybody else as Ray Donovan if anybody else would cast in this before. You are Ray Donovan.
Thank you. There were a lot of guys they wanted before me.
Wow.
But no, I see them. He would have been much better. I think. There's a couple of guys.
The show is very film noir. Was that intended to be for the very beginning?
Yeah, that was the idea that we were going to do a noir. It was we were hoping to do a noir. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you were brought up on black and white films, weren't you? Growing up?
But I didn't have much to do with that decision. That was Anne. That was Anne, and she always knew that a big influence for her was The Long Goodbye and Chinatown and that whole period and that relationship, particularly between L.A. and noir. Yeah. And pulp was something. And pulp was kind of the thing that I wanted to do more of, to bring more to. That there was, I always liked those pulpy books and comics. Yeah.
Very Philip Marlowe, very Robert Mitchum. I loved that whole time period. I figured Ray is sort of a throwback to that whole thing. I want to go back to the beginning. Growing up, where did your love for performing begin, and what were your earliest creative outlets?
I had a teacher at Brooklyn Tech an English teacher who entered me in a poetry contest. I don't know what he read that I wrote. I think it was some, like, Constance Erdang poem that I plagiarized. Or pretty closely plagiarized. But he liked it, and he thought I could write, and he said I should enter this poetry contest. And I entered it, and I won. And I thought, oh, winning is cool. So maybe I'm good at this, because no one else seems to be into this. I was like the only person, so I was like, my theory was always big fish, small pond. Find the small ponds. I played the bass clarinet. I played the bass clarinet in a band that played the Mendelssohn Wedding March for a production of Midsummer Night's Dream. And I remember being in the orchestra pit watching the actors do the Shakespeare and just being like, they're terrible. I was looking at the other musicians like a quintet, a woodwind quintet, and I'm just looking, they're fucking awful. I mean, that is so cheesy. And they were all, they didn't care. Their musicians were like, But I couldn't stop talking during the whole show. I was like, this is really, I mean, look at that. It's really, oh, come on. And there's not a peep. They're not getting laughs. They're not, it's just, it's dead. And that was like, I was like, okay, then maybe I want to do that more than I want to do this. Yeah. And then I did my first Shakespeare play, and I loved it.
Because did you co-star with Jeffrey Donovan in The Merchant of Venice at school, at college?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was it University of Massachusetts? Where were you?
It was at UMass. Yeah.
Okay. Is that where your acting began?
No, my acting began at Friends Seminary. Okay. I played Nick Bottom in Midsummer Night's Dream. I was after that play once I saw those mooks. I was like, I'm gonna get that. That's the play I want to do.
So that's where your love for Shakespeare began?
Well, my mom encouraged me to read it. My mom really encouraged me to read a lot. I was really into reading. And I liked classical things. I liked old things. I liked strange things. I played the bass clarinet, for crying out loud. You know?
Well, talk about the influence that George C. Wolfe and the public theater has had on your career and what those experiences have meant to you.
I owe George everything, you know. Yeah. I got out of Yale, and he just said, this place could be your home if you want it, you know. And I hadn't done anything. I'd done nothing. He didn't know I was any good. He didn't know anything about me. I auditioned for his Tempest, and I played a tiny role in it. I played Sebastian, and he just said, he just made me feel at home always, and I always felt at home at that theater. And he just kept giving me parts, and it just grew from there. And it was like that. I enjoyed it, you know. That was what a great place to be, and it's hard because there are not a lot of actors who want to commit to $500 a week at the public. And again, it was small pond, big fish. And I just said, yeah, I want to do this. And I kept turning movie things down, and I kept, not a lot of movie things, but, you know, things that I could say no to, I would say no to, and I kept doing plays. And George just kept giving me better and better parts, and I got to go through all these parts that most actors only dream about playing, and I was able to play them.
Everybody who I've spoken to who's worked at the public said it's the most freeing home, that you just get to do your work.
Yeah. It was, you know, I was also George was a remarkable guy. You know, he was a really wonderful guy. And then there was an environment at the theater back then that was it's still there, by the way.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to say, but George was special to me. And he really meant a lot to me as a young actor. But there was a ferocity that he had in his approach to it, and there was a freewheeling kind of openness to it all, and every aspect of it, and you just felt like anything was possible.
Yeah, because you got to do some at the Public Theater and some at the Delacorte in the park, and I think one of the first things you saw was Raul Julia in something in the park.
Yeah.
What did you see him in there? Do you remember what
I saw him in Othello.
Yeah.
And I remember that Desdemona's death scene, a crane flew up from behind the castle, and I was like, whoa. Outdoor Shakespeare, okay, this is good.
What were your experiences like doing Shakespeare in the Park?
Athletic.
Yeah.
Wet.
Yeah.
Just jazz, just always, it was exciting. It was so physical that acting was that physical. I really liked it. I really liked when acting got physical.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I loved about Shakespeare. It was so physical. Of course, it's mental as well, and of course, you're working dialogue at an incredible pace. But that act of cognition that it takes to break down that text and make it coherent is in itself physical.
Yeah.
And that space and the size, and it's very physical, and I like that a lot.
Yeah. Well, you started your career on stage, and you always return home to it. So let's talk about some of your stage highlights, and just tell me what comes to mind, a fun story or a memory or something. You did 2 Harold Pinter plays, Moonlight, which you did at Roundabout with Jason Robards and Blythe Danner. And then you did Betrayal with Juliette Binoche. Favorite memories of doing those?
Jason.
Yeah.
Jason was just, you know, amazing. I was working on stage with Jason Robards. It was amazing. And Carol Rice became a dear friend of mine, the director. Just every one of those, every gig was like a learning experience. An incredible, the mentors I had, the teachers that I had, were just, who learns from Jason Robards and Carol Rice?
Yeah.
And Jason was just the funniest guy. He would write his lines on things. Like, this was like a guy in his 70s, you know, who was doing 2 shows at once, simultaneously in rep. He was doing Moonlight, which, by the way, he had all the lines. And then he's doing Molly Sweeney or something like that in rep, simultaneously on the weekends. And I just didn't know how he did it. And then every once in a while, he'd be playing a scene with you, and he just kind of, there would be like, pick up a picture of his wife. So cool.
Yeah.
So cool. I've never gone up in my life in front of a paying audience, ever, until this last play. Second preview, they had a girl in the wings who was going to be on book because I was having so much trouble with the lines. And I said, give me a radio mic. I said, I'm not giving you a radio mic. I want a radio mic. No, you can't have a radio mic. So I'm trying to do the play. ripped untimely from the womb. And Jane Gray, who's a really good friend of mine, who did talk radio, stage manager, she tells the girl who's doing the thing, she said, Liev is one of the proudest guys. He's never gonna call for a line. He's never, ever gonna call for a line. So this girl's back there like... About 30 minutes into the show, I hope none of you were there. About 30 minutes into the show, I'm like, oh, dead spot. I look over at Janet, because sometimes Janet can pull me out of them, and she's like, And I'm like, you know, without saying anything, I'm like, no, really, dead spot. And she's like, And I just sat there for what felt like an hour and a half, and it was probably 30 seconds or so. No, it was probably 15 seconds. And then I went, line. And apparently that wasn't loud enough. And that's like the most humiliating, crushing moment of my career, because I've never done that, and I would never do that.
Yeah.
I like breaking the fourth wall. That's important. I love to break the fourth wall, but never by saying line. And then I realized it's not loud enough, so the second time I'm like, line. And she... And so if I shouldn't hear that again, I'm like, line! And I hear panic and rustling, and she says something completely inaudible. And so I make up a line from Act 2 and say it, which inspires something that Janet picks up, gets, and puts us back on track, and we go. But that's my response to not knowing my lines, and I'm nowhere near 70. Jason Robards does this.
So do we see that in your near future?
I wish that I'd remembered that.
Totally. That's wild. You won the Tony Award for your brilliant performance as Ricky Roma in David Mamet's Glengarry Glen Ross. Perfect ensemble. What did you enjoy the most about doing that play and tackling Mamet?
The musicality and the playfulness between that company that was very buoyant. We were all batting around. We were moving. It was very light. It was very comedic. There was a lot of dexterity, and nothing was precious. And there was just incredible sense of ensemble. And the thing would ping around the room, and you felt it. You just knew when actors don't drop the ball, that's what happens. And it's like everybody knew each other's timing, and everybody was sensitive to it, and nobody was grandstanding. And so the thing flew around the room, and I got all the credit because I had the big part. But it was just so much fun. And Joe Montello, who's an extraordinary director, who on opening night gave me a wooden box of steak knives, and his card just said, kill them all. And that was it. I was right. That was Ricky Roma. Just kill them all. Fuck them. You know? I love
the look of everybody. I mean, Alan Alda, you can recognize him.
Yeah.
You know, do you remember the first time you saw him?
No, with the hair and the suit that didn't fit, and me with that I had to walk around with that mustache for like 3 months. It was horrible.
Did doing Shakespeare make it easier for you to understand the rhythms of Mamet?
Of course. Yeah, I think doing Shakespeare made Mamet understand the rhythms of Mamet. And I think Pinter too.
Yeah.
And Beckett.
Because a lot of actors I talk to say they always stumble with Mamet, like during the rehearsal process. But Shakespearean actors who I've talked to said, oh, they understand the rhythm.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty intuitive.
Yeah.
And I think you gotta, for my money, when I watch actors do these musical plays, I call them, the language plays, is a little too much thinking sometimes going on, like about how to do it. don't worry about how to do it, just do it, you know. Don't think too much about the silences and the pauses and the things. Just let it flow, and it happens. And that's sort of the truth with Shakespeare. It's just parsing it, you know? Once you understand what you're saying, it all becomes really clear.
Yeah.
You know? So start with the lucid plays, start with the easy plays. Like Hamlet's a very easy play.
Is it really?
I think so. It's a very clear play. That's why people love it so much. The other plays are like, what? Like, I didn't understand that. But Hamlet, you know what he's to be or not to be. That's the question. How hard is that? You know what I mean? And then once you get a sense of that language, once your brain opens up and adapts to the range of that vocabulary and meter,
yeah,
then it gets easier to understand the other plays. But pick the easy ones first. Scottish play's a good one, too.
I never thought that before. That's interesting. They're very clear.
They're very clear. They're very lucid plays.
Yeah.
And then you can get more dense. Once you figure out how he uses alliteration, how he uses antithesis, how he uses imagery, then it becomes clear, and you see things repeated so that you can understand them. And also, the vocabulary, you start to develop the muscularity for that vocabulary.
Sure. Talk Radio by Eric Bogosian, where you played abrasive radio talk show host Barry Champlain. The New York Times called you the finest American theater actor of your generation. Totally agree. Favorite memories of that experience in working with director Robert Falls?
Getting to meet Eric Bogosian, who I was a huge fan of. I wrote my senior thesis on Brecht and Shakespeare, and the idea of Brecht's concept about acting was that in any given moment, an actor is responsible for these three elements. One is to play the part they've been contracted to play. These things have to be present constantly when you're working. To play the part that you've been contracted to play. Two, to be an actor who has been contracted to play a part. And three, to be a member of a socio-political society who happens to be an actor who happens to be playing this part. And what I liked about that was that everything, particularly with Shakespeare, everything was important. Like in soliloquy, I could look into the audience, and they knew that they were looking at an actor. But my perspective as the character and as the actor and as the socio-political person was that, does that lessen in any way the value or the inherent truth of what I'm saying? Just because you know I'm not who I'm saying I am, does that make it any less important? And there was something about that that really makes people go, whew, this is scary, this is real, this is powerful. And there's something that it does to the actor, that it empowers them, where they think, this is not fake, there's nothing fake. And then when theater starts to spill out over the stage, or in the case of film, through the screen, it really becomes exciting. And I think that that's what Brecht was on about. And that we do things that are substantive and have meaning to us so that they have meaning to others. And talk radio, why it was so important to me was I grew up watching performance artists and people like Eric Bogosian who would go to clubs. I remember at Danceteria once, he had this Ricky, this lounge lizard act. And literally all he was trying to do was get the people in the audience to throw bottles at him. This was like the punk rock of theater, and I didn't think there could be a punk rock in theater, but I'd read about Artaud and all of that stuff, but here was a guy who was actually doing it. He was out on stage, and you know, he was messed up at that point in his life, but he was out there on stage making fun of these bridge and tunnel people who had come to Danceteria, trying to get them, and you know, he's bridge and tunnel, but he's trying to get them pissed off at him so that they'll do something, so it'll start a fight, it'll start a reaction, something incendiary. And I just thought that was such a provocative and interesting kind of theater, and that had some place in broader application to the work that we all do outside of places like Danceteria. There was a way of applying that to Shakespeare, that there's something rebellious, there's something provocative about talking to someone and looking them in the eye and not being afraid to acknowledge the truth of what is in the play. And he was a big inspiration to me. And then he did a play at Lincoln Center, and I went and auditioned for it, Suburbia, and he couldn't have been less interested in me. And I was like, I wrote my senior thesis on you. He's like, yeah, next. And I was devastated.
Yeah.
And then they called me to do talk radio, and I was like, I'm doing Bogosian.
Yeah.
It was a huge deal for me. It was a huge...
Big challenge to play that role 8 times a week?
My God. And I smoked like a half a pack of cigarettes every night. I think that's like the big scene at the end where he just sort of breaks down. That's like from like a nicotine, overdose. But what a great, the other trick about that production that nobody really knows is that I was playing into a microphone. So I could do all sorts of things with my voice that I couldn't normally do on a stage. I could get emotion to carry. I could break things down. I could do breathing stuff that you can't normally do on the stage. So it was a great, and as a guy who's done a lot of VO work and played around with a lot of microphones, it was really fun. And of course I looked at it like I was cheating, because it was to me. You could do all sorts of emotional stuff when you're amplified, so subtly amplified that you can't do on a stage,
Arthur Miller's A View from the Bridge, your remarkable performance as Eddie Carbone, for director Gregory Mosher. How challenging was he to play? Talk about breakdowns.
That was another one. I was like, I'm not right for this part.
Yeah.
And I was why do I keep doing plays with guys that are breaking down and getting killed in the end? There's a lot of that in my life. I don't know why. I didn't know how good Miller was. I really didn't. And that's what that play was for me. I never really cared for naturalism.
Yeah.
I always thought it was, as a young actor, I kind of thought it was boring. I was terrible at Chekhov. Terrible. Like at Yale, everybody was like, Chekhov. And I was like, this sucks. I can't do it. And I just thought it was so bad. I had no in. I didn't really care much for the method. I didn't really care much for my own experience. I didn't like it. It wasn't big enough. It wasn't exciting enough to me. It wasn't colorful enough. It didn't have any va-va-voom to it. It was like, look at me, I'm interesting. No, you're not. That was my attitude towards it. And I just didn't, it took me that play to learn what he was really on about. That incredible passion that he had as a writer and as a human being, look, I really underestimated. And I want to go back and look at Chekhov, but I still can't do it. And that, for me, was an inroad into a certain kind of acting that I had to figure out my own way to, because I was never very good at it in school. I just wanted to be bigger all the time. And I think that probably put me on the runway to Ray Donovan.
What are you the proudest of in your life?
2 boys, Sasha and Kai.
What is the best bit of advice that you've been given, both personally and professionally, that you live your life by?
Try to be nice.
Yeah. I thank you. I've been doing this for over 25 years. I thank you for one of the most beautiful afternoons. Thank you very much. Liev Schreiber. Yeah.